kid is the truth.
Yes, Your Honor.
Could you please state your name, spelling your last for the record?
Good morning. My name is Dr. Emerson Couples. Couples is C-O-U-P-L-E-S.
And what do you do for a living, doctor?
I am an associate professor at the University of Iowa in the Department of Psychology. And working in this department has allowed me to focus much of my teachings and research on child psychology, with a particular emphasis on disruptive behavior disorders, such as psychopathy.
What sort of education do you have that allows you to hold your position, doctor?
I have completed my bachelor's, master's, and PhD, all in psychology and from the University of Illinois.
And what sort of experience do you have in the field of psychology?
Well, between earning my master's and PhD, I completed a one-year internship at the Children's Hospital Medical Center in Washington, D.C., and following the completion of my PhD, I was a postdoctoral fellow for the Center for Families and Children in the Department of Psychology at the State University of New York at Buffalo.
What sort of qualifications do you have in your field, doctor?
I am licensed to practice in Illinois and Midlands. I'm an elected fellow of the American Psychological Association, and in 2012, I received the Professor of the Year Award at the University of Iowa.
So, Dr. Couples, how are you involved in today's case?
I was hired by Miss Andy Park to assess whether or not Jessie Duran had any pre-existing mental conditions that could explain why she would deliberately point a loaded firearm at Sydney Park on August 18th of 2010.
When you were coming to your conclusions about Jessie, did you have sufficient facts and data?
Yes, I did.
Did you use reliable principles and methods?
Yes, I did.
What facts and data did you rely upon?
I relied upon the affidavits of Danny Brooks, the babysitter, Tara Chapin, the neighbor, Andy Park, the plaintiff, and Hayden Duran, the defendant. I also reviewed a copy of Jessie's deposition as well as some of the exhibits.
Were those the only facts and data that you relied upon?
No, I also relied upon 20 interviews I conducted, 3 of which were with former babysitters of Jessie Duran, 6 were with former teachers, and 11 were with fellow classmates and playmates, also of Jessie Duran's.
Now, when coming to your conclusions, did you apply those facts and data reliably to the reliable principles and methods?
Yes, of course.
Dr. Couples, then, could you please tell the members of the jury what psychopathy is?
Psychopathy is a mental condition that causes people who suffer from this disorder to have a complete lack of empathy or emotion for others. They're also capable of exhibiting behavior that perfectly rational people would find horrifying or baffling.
What do you mean by that, doctor?
Due to the nature of this condition, people with psychopathy have been known to lie very convincingly for trivial gain or deny doing something in such a manner that most rational people would have no trouble believing them. This could also go as far as killing someone without hesitation and later denying having done so.
Well, do all people with psychopathy exhibit these traits?
Not necessarily. Most people with psychopathy will never become violent, nor will they ever get in trouble with the law. However, it is important to note that people with psychopathy seek thrills, and the violent ones are violent because that is their chosen source of thrill.
Dr. Couples, how did you go about diagnosing Jessie Duran?
I use what is known as the PI-J test, which stands for the Psychopathy Assessment Instrument for Juveniles.
And what does this measure on Jessie Duran?
The PI-J test measures 10 different traits in which it awards a score of 2, 1, or 0 for a total combined range between 0 and 20.
And what does each of the scores mean?
A score of 2 represents that the trait clearly applies. A score of 1 means that the trait is somewhat applicable, and a score of 0 means that the trait is never present.
And what score is necessary to diagnose somebody with psychopathy?
We require a score of 12 to fully diagnose someone with psychopathy.
Now, out of the traits that you tested Jessie Duran on, which were the most definitive?
I tested Jessie Duran across 10 different traits, which were gratuitous and or guiltless lying, defiance of authority figures, persistent aggressive behavior, unresponsive to threats or reprimands of punishment, vandalism, petty theft, cruelty to animals, indifference to the pain of others, early sexual experimentation, and cutting class or breaking curfew. Now, of those 10 traits, Jessie Duran exhibited the first 8 that I listed, and the 3 most dominant ones that I focused my evaluation on were gratuitous and or guiltless lying, persistent aggressive behavior, and defiance of authority figures.
Well, doctor, what evidence did you find to suggest gratuitous or guiltless lying?
Every person with whom I spoke was able to recount an incident in which Jessie Duran was found lying or being untruthful. For instance, one of Jessie's former teachers recounts an incident in which Jessie falsely, insistently, and convincingly claimed that Hayden Duran, who has always worked in IT at the hospital, was in fact a retired police officer.
And what evidence did you find to suggest defiance of authority figures?
This was also recounted through 2 previous babysitters and 4 previous teachers, who were able to recount week or more long periods in which Jessie Duran would scream anytime she was asked to perform an ordinary task, such as putting shoes away or cleaning up after herself. Now, also in my review of Andy Park's affidavit, Andy describes a instance in which Jessie screams and throws a fit because Andy must take away one of her very violent video games.
Now lastly, I want to talk about what you found in suggesting persistent aggressive behavior. What did you find there?
This was mostly seen through the fellow classmates of Jessie Duran, in which they were able to recount instances in which Jessie was seen biting, pushing, shoving other children. Now, this is also corroborated with a disciplinary note that was sent home by Jessie's school, as well as a picture that was drawn by Jessie.
Dr. Couples, if I showed you a copy of the disciplinary note, would you recognize it in court today?
Yes, I would.
I'm approaching the opposing counsel with plaintiffs 1. And I'm approaching the witness with the same. Doctor, what did I just hand you?
This is the notification of student discipline sent home by Jessie's school.
And does this appear to be a fair and accurate copy of the disciplinary notice?
It is, yes.
And does it appear to have been altered in any way?
No, it has not.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to move plaintiffs 1 into evidence.
Any objections?
Yes, Your Honor. I object that this document is hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, this document and its entirety would fall under the conclusions or this would help to fall, this is used for Dr. Couples' conclusions, therefore evidence that would normally be inadmissible would now be admissible because it's going directly to her conclusions.
May I respond?
Yes.
This document is written by people who are not being called in this testimony. It doesn't represent anything that Hayden Park has said, so that's making it hearsay.
And overrule the objection.
So, Dr. Couples, what can you tell us about this disciplinary notice?
This disciplinary notice basically summarizes how this is the 3rd reprimand that Jessie is receiving for showing violence towards another student.
Now, you also referenced a picture drawn by Jessie Duran. Would you recognize it if I showed it to you in court?
Yes.
I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been previously marked plaintiffs 2. And I'm approaching the witness with the same. What did I just hand you, Doctor?
This was the picture that Jessie drew while at school.
And does this appear to be a fair and accurate copy of that picture?
Yes.
How do we know that this was drawn by Jessie Duran?
Well, first off, it is labeled Jessie D at the top. Yeah, her name is written at the top.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to move plaintiffs 2 into evidence.
Any objections?
Yes, Your Honor. I would object that this is hearsay. She has no way to, she has no experience in accurately deciding whether or not this has been written directly by Jessie himself.
Are you saying that this is not authentic or that this is hearsay?
Well, this is hearsay, and also the fact that she can't authenticate that it's his. So it's hearsay, and the fact that we can't decide whether or not it's his.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Going back to a previous ruling as to why this wouldn't be hearsay, because this witness used this directly in her conclusions, which is why under 703 this would be allowed as not hearsay.
To the extent that the document is statements, I believe this would be statements of the party opponent, so I will overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Dr. Couples, what can you tell us about this picture?
When Jessie was in grade 3, the teacher asked her class to draw an adventure story of whatever they chose to draw about. Now, Jessie, in her adventure, she decides to draw about herself holding a gun.
And what does that tell you, doctor?
Well, due to the images and the significance of the drawing, Jessie is pointing it at objects, at animals, but most significantly at other people. Now, between the interviews I conducted, the discipline note that was sent home, in this picture, this clearly indicates that Jessie Duran did have persistent aggressive behavior.
Now, doctor, I want to talk to you about your conclusions about Jessie Duran. What did Jessie Duran score on your Pi-J test?
Jessie's final score was a 12.
And with a score of 12, what does that mean?
This means that I was able to diagnose Jessie Duran as a subject with psychopathy.
Now, what does that mean for today's case?
This will have two major implications for today's case. The first is that it should not be assumed that Jessie Duran would have difficulty or even have been able to unintentionally harm Sydney Park. Also, she would also be able to subject Sydney Park to a great deal of harm without any difficulty whatsoever.
And you said the second implication you mentioned?
It is that none of Jessie's statements should be taken at face value, as some of the great hallmarks of psychopathy are egocentrism and the subject's ability to completely hide their lack of emotion. These people will often seem very sincere in current situations because they are excellent at determining the demeanor, emotions, and words that will be most advantageous to them in their current situation.
Thank you for your testimony, Dr. Couples. There will be no further questions. Permission to retrieve the evidence from the witness and tender to the bench?
Absolutely.